I don't know how many people have actually watched my video about me discussing a little bit about what I discovered from my near-death experience, but I do know that I don't actually have a description of the experience told. And so this will be the first time, other than people who have actually sat down and heard the account from me. And I'm probably going to tag my cousin in this because she is also like me, was born awake, and we were born into a family dynamic that was very religious abusive, which is a story I know a lot of you all have. And there was a lot of narcissistic, toxic gaslighting and things like that, and doctrine used to convince us that we needed to do what we were told, practice what was preached, and behave a certain way, or we weren't going to be accepted by our loved ones. And so she and I both have had, I think, of everyone in our family, and everyone has different experiences of it on this particular specific aspect of my family. Is one of the only other ones that, like me, we shared an affinity for understanding and seeing and knowing things that we shouldn't have been able to, and were ridiculed or expected to be the good girl, keep our mouths shut, be seen, not be heard kind of mentality. And girls were really mistreated in our family. There were less sons, that is true. Most of the females on that side of my family had daughters, and I will say that some of my aunts displayed some rather antagonistic and low vibrational behavior with their own daughters, and I don't have any relationships with any of them now. I haven't in a long time because I refused from the time I was a little girl to comply. And I was a really good kid. I was really smart, but I was probably too smart for my own good. And I was born vocal and awake and knowledgeable. And every time I seen an adult abuse or take advantage of a child and try to use God as the reason for excusing it, and there were some terrible things that have happened in our family history that I'm sure none of them want me to discuss, but I really don't give a rat's ass what they think. Because you know what it comes down to is when you get free from those kind of things, you learn that the 3 F's really are all that matters, other than, and if those things really aren't being applied to by someone else in their influence on your life, then what's the point? The only thing bigger than that is faith in Creator above. And notice that's again an F. 4 F's. If you're not part of my faith, you ain't effing me, feeding me, or financing me, then I don't really care what your opinion is. I would hope that you like me. I would hope that you would support my content. I would hope that whatever I create here and put out there helps you. Because I do believe that contributing to the collective is the reason I'm here. Being a voice for the oppressed and those who have none is what my calling directly was. And I had a call to action moment in my life, but that came after my near-death experience, which really, they actually coincided very closely together, and I've explained how that happened. So, my youngest child is 12 years of age, and I have had a partial hysterectomy. I still have my ovaries intact because I was only 25 years old when I had him, and yes, I do have 4 kids, and he was the youngest. So I got started pretty young. I actually got married for the first time at 16, and 3 out of my 4 children were with that person. And we were married for 7 years. And then my second marriage was 5 years, and that is my youngest son's father. Okay, so, and I haven't been married again. I've been engaged once, was with that person for 6 years. And I've been single and celibate for the last 3 years with my focus on my work, my children, and what I believe my commission in life from the Creator is. So I've become an activist and an advocate, and I've pretty much committed my life to my life work. Now, I would love to meet a wonderful man that could match me on that, and who's also just as committed and is my divine masculine, which is a whole other thing. I do believe that soulmates come in many forms, and I've had a few, but I've never actually had a twin flame. So I don't know if that's in the cards for me or not, and if it isn't, that's okay. I've come to a place of contentment within myself, and that's happened in the wake of all of these other things that I'm about to explain. So I was pregnant with my youngest son, and I ended up having a rare a complication called placenta precreta. And what happened is the placenta with my child grew through my uterus and the uterine wall and started to grow into my bladder. As a result of this, I had to have my son 3 months early, so he was 90 days premature, and I was hospitalized for 2 whole weeks. And in that time, I was on the high-risk maternity floor, and I actually, because of the way the placenta was, they had to give me a C-section, which it was my 4th C-section. I've had 3 other ones before for other complications. I had my first one with my first daughter, and that was just a terrible birth story, and we both almost died. And that was continually my issue. I had, my last 2 babies were both preemies, so I had a bad time, but I have been blessed to say, and I lament for all of those of you who have ever lost a child, that I never lost a child, I never lost a pregnancy, and I'm thankful to God for that. But I did almost lose my own life and have almost lost many of my children multiple times. But anyway, continuing on. So I was in the hospital, and I hemorrhaged on the OR table when they did the long form, regular, old school cesarean section on me. And that was from the belly button down as opposed to the bikini cut. I hemorrhaged and I lost 25 units of blood. So it took 25 blood transfusions to keep me alive, which is the equivalent of 5 adult grown men, the entire blood volume. And then I had to have an extra platelet sack, so that was actually 26 bags altogether of what they had to put into me to keep me alive. And in the process of that happening, and they got inside of me, they seen that my uterus was wrecked, and the only way to save me was to cut it out and to give me a partial hysterectomy. Well, while I was under, I had this hemorrhage, and I nearly died. And my cousin and my ex-husband both can corroborate that. My cousin, Goddess Sophia on here, was actually the first person's voice that I heard when I was coming out. So I truly believe that it was her who pulled me out of me dying, in addition to my spirit guides that were there with me during the NDA. Okay, so I'm under, and I remember the last thing I seen was the ceiling before I went under, and they walked me through what was happening, and then I was out. While I was out, I woke, I came into subconsciousness inside of this long black tunnel, and it was just a void. There was nothing. And I couldn't hear anything. I couldn't see anything. It was just pure pitch black. Then all of a sudden, at the end of it, there was this slow moving, bright white light, but it emanated, like vibrating like a frequency. And so it was drawing me in like a moth to a flame, and I wanted to get closer to it. And the closer that I drew, the calmer, and just this pure, overwhelming feeling of joy and love and absolute just euphoria came over me. And it was one of the most beautiful feelings, and I have never felt it again, not any time in my life, and I never think I will again until I come into the being with the Most High. But I felt pressure as I was walking and getting closer on this shoulder and then on this shoulder. So I turned this way, and I seen my father's mother, who died when I was 3 years old, my grandmother Elizabeth. And then I turned on this side, and something was pushing on this side, and it was my great-grandmother on my mother's side, my grandmother Bernice. Now, both of these women had been gone for some time, but they both looked at me and they said, "No, you need to turn around and go back. It's not your time yet. There's a lot more you need to do. You have to do it. You're the one that has to do it. Go back." Then as I was coming to, I could hear out this ear, and mind you, I'm hearing impaired. I'm 90% deaf. I didn't lose my hearing until later in life, but I am. And even then I was already showing signs. I just didn't realize it. And I hear Goddess Sophia talking about, and she had went and taken pictures of my son who was still in the NICU after I had him, because I didn't come out for hours after I had him. I had no way to see him, and they didn't know if I was actually going to make it or not. And she was telling my husband about that, and I could hear her, and I woke up, and she was the first person I seen, and she said, "Oh, look, I got to show you your baby." And she starts flipping through all these pictures, and I just wanted people to know that there really is a God out there. And the things that, I'm sorry I got emotional here, but the things that I have seen and experienced, there's going to be a part 2 on this, are really important, because they set me on the path to doing what I'm doing now. And I never would have believed that I'd be where I am today. But these things happened, and that happened when I had my son. And then 11 months later, I had another vision, and that was when I was called to action. And I will explain that in part 2 of this. Hopefully by then I'm not all teary-eyed and falling